Good evening, everyone. Once again, welcome to the Future Ready Marketer live webinar series brought to you by Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing, the national body of marketing. As you know, Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing is the apex body of professional marketers in Sri Lanka. Since our inception in 1970, we have been empowering, inspiring and motivating local marketers just like you. And now today we are, this webinar series is about broadening your horizons and contributing back to the betterment of the local economy. So we want to equip you, we want to give you all the latest trends, patterns, insights to make you a future ready marketer. Now, the above webinar series is our latest effort in creating a platform to bring together local and international industry experts to share best-in-class knowledge, emerging trends, themes, case studies, and experiences. Now, to benefit you from local marketers and support you to understand the ever-changing marketing landscape to become a future-ready marketers. Now, with this in mind, Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing has been endeavoring in many initiatives. Now, most of you would know last year, Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing embarked on Restart Sri Lanka. Restart Sri Lanka is a national campaign to activate Sri Lanka towards its economic prosperity. Now we have come to you with Future Ready Sri Lanka, a phase 2 of Restart Sri Lanka. Now the objectives of this webinar series, as we've been talking about it in previous weeks, it's a national campaign to challenge dependent risk averse mentality and to bring in entrepreneurs, to bring in innovation, to bring in aspects like design thinking into our marketing fraternity. The key emphasis would be to change our thinking, change traditional Sri Lankan mindset, and for us to become a global level, a global standard economy in the time to come, in future to come. Now, with this in mind, we are bringing in multiple experts to talk to you about various trends and patterns that is of utmost relevance and importance to you in the local arena as well as global arena. So keeping this in mind, without further ado, I want to take you to our speaker today. Now, most of you, this expert marketer is not anything new. I mean, he is not a person who's new to you. He is a well-known senior strategic marketing professional with over 15 years of experience working in both Sri Lanka and Singapore. He, for local as well as multinational FMCG businesses, he's also worked for apparel, consumer durable companies. Now, this gentleman is specialized in his knowledge and expertise for brand and marketing management and have immense experience, not just in local arena, but in global marketing as well. Now, he comes from a very interesting background. He comes from a biotechnology background. He is graduated in Australia. He also equips with an MBA in marketing management, also from Australia, the University of Southern Queensland. And he started his career as very young as you are, as many of you are, as a management trainee at Hemas Consumer, the local conglomerate of companies. He has built his marketing fundamentals at Fonterra Brands, a well-known branding organization, which are the makers and the brand marketers of Anchor. And also, he has worked in Sri Lanka and Singapore. He's gained experience in B2B consumer marketing at MAS Active, which is a global standard Sri Lankan organization. Now, he's also currently serving as the marketing director for Sri Lanka's #1 consumer durable company, which is Singer Sri Lanka PLC. By now, you know who he is. You don't need much more introduction to him. He is none other than Mr. Shanil Perera, who is serving as the marketing director of Sri Lanka. Today, he's going to talk to you about the evolving consumer. The most important element of marketing is consumer. Shanil, over to you to enlighten our Sri Lankan marketers about the future and how to be future ready with regard to consumer and their knowledge.
Thank you, Aruz. Firstly, I want to take the opportunity to thank Mrs. Tilanka Abeyewardena, the president of SLIM, and the Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing for inviting me to talk to you today It is certainly an interesting subject we have today to talk about, which is understanding your evolving consumer. Now, it's an important topic and a very apt topic, especially in this changing environment, rapidly changing environment and marketplace. And when we talk about evolving, the tendency is to think that evolving happens at a slow pace. But in today's context, it happens much faster. And as modern marketers, we need to understand that our consumers are evolving at a very rapid pace, and we have to be agile. That is, that we have to adapt in a very fast manner. And hence, the understanding of evolving consumer is a very interesting topic. So a few things to note before I start. Some of the observations and the content I'll be sharing with you today are based on the current context. Of course, we are just in the middle of a pandemic, and we're not so much through it yet. But some of the trends are a result of the current context and the pandemic. When we look at some of the trends for consumer, we must make sure we don't generalize it. As you know, there are different consumer segments. You have consumer segments from SEC A to E. So it's important that we understand that some of the trends will apply to certain segments while it might not be to others. So that's something to keep in mind. I would urge you to put your consumer cap on. Now, the reason I say that is often as marketers, we tend to alienate the consumer, or we think of the consumer as a totally different person whom you're trying really hard to understand. But in reality, all of us are consumers ourselves. So at some point of time, you are a consumer. So make sure you put your consumer cap on when we go through some of the content. And also, lastly, sense check, right? No one has 100% correct information, and no one is 100% correct. So it's important to sense check and see whether it makes sense in your mind. Does that sound right, what he's talking about? Because that's also a trait of a marketer, being able to challenge and also to critically think whether what is being shared is right or not. So let's get cracking. So today I hope to share some trends, and we'll firstly start with consumer trends. And it will be shared from a slightly broader context. I'll try to cover different aspects of the consumer. And secondly, I hope to cover some digital trends. Now, the reason for covering some digital trends is when you talk about consumer trends, everybody says it's digital. Everything is about digital. True enough. And I will do a little bit of a deep dive into some of the trends that are on digital, which will impact the way we market to our consumers. Now, these are my references, and I want to take a moment to highlight these references and also to talk to you about the importance of referencing. The modern day marketer, in my opinion, has to have an ear to the ground and an eye on research to come up with actionable insights. A ear to the ground, meaning you need to know what's happening in the ground reality. So you don't want to be secluded to reaching or reading material online or what is happening in research without knowing what's happening in the market. But at the same time, you also have to have an eye on research. Research is important because it helps you shape the way you will move your marketing strategies. And actionable insights are obviously any research will come and give you insights, but those insights may not mean anything if you can't action them. So that is very important. And in my opinion, with all due respect to all the marketing gurus out there, nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can pin it down to years and years of experience saying, this is how I did it, this is how it was done, because it's rapidly changing. So you have to be well read and stay abreast of what's happening in the world, in the region and in the country. So basically what I wanted to just say is be open, use data, sense check it, go with it, learn with it, or learn from it. These are the kind of rules that you will follow when doing referencing and research to form your marketing strategies. All right, enough said. Let's move on to the first trend. So in terms of the first trend, um, which I think is really shaping the way we market, is the shift to value. Now, you may think initially, um, I didn't think that was something new. It's been there for a while, and right enough, even in my last 15 years of doing marketing, whenever I read on a research paper or looked at a research study, the first thing that comes up is value, and consumers put that as the number one priority. But it's important to kind of dissect the meaning of value. Value is not necessarily always the cheapest. Value is not always the lowest price. There is a different meaning to value. And in the current context and in the light of the pandemic, we feel that this shift to value takes a different kind of turn. So the first one I think is consumers are getting more cautious and frugal. Now, being cautious is thinking twice. Frugal is being sparing and economical. A recent Kanta research, which was done in the panel, has found that consumers are trying to maximize their value. And especially in daily use product categories like branded tea, milk powder, toothpaste, shampoo, they found that housewives and even consumers as a whole are trying to rationalize through different pack sizes. They're trying to move to bigger packs. Now, this may appeal to a certain segment of consumers, and this also could be a result of a lower frequency of purchase. Remember, during the lockdowns, you were not able to go out and buy as frequently as you normally would. So naturally, you would tend to upsize and buy larger pack. And by doing that, you would also see the value in it. So this is a trend that will continue, because once you see the value in a certain product, you will always use that as your basis in terms of purchase. So this is something that is coming out, and there is research to kind of validate that. So there is opportunity for marketers to really drive value perceptions, value for money offerings, and showing value in their products, where it can be value added elements in your product. So that's the importance of value. It's not about being the cheapest or being the lowest priced in the market. The second aspect is the fact that discretionary spending is in check and it's shifting to value. Now, when we say discretionary spending, consumers are reevaluating their purchase behavior, their purchase basket. The share of wallet is up for grabs because they're thinking twice and thinking, I used to spend XYZ rupees on certain elements. Now with the current situation, current pandemic situation, do I spend it on the same kind of products and services, or do I shift to something of more of value? And I'll give you an example. With the whole pandemic situation, learning from home, working from home has become more of a norm. Especially when you take learning from home, think about a consumer who used to discretionally spend on various activities, now having to buy a mobile phone or a laptop for their children to attend classes from home. So here, the spending is reallocated, and they see much more value in a mobile phone or a laptop for their children because it enables them to learn from home. So here also, there's nothing to do with the cost, right? Because a mobile phone and a laptop is quite expensive, but they perceive it as more valuable because given the context, that seems to be the right thing to do. So you would see certain reallocation of spending. I mean, think about the last time you went on a holiday or went overseas, especially for the higher SEC groups. They haven't been doing that. So where would that purchase kind of behavior shift to? They would look for items with value. And finally, maybe to the SEC B, C, Ds, there is also a demand for no-frill products and services which are on the rise. Now, examples here are that some consumers, they kind of look past the bells and the whistles, and as marketers, we do a lot of advertising. They see through the smoke and the mirrors and they say, I want a basic product. I just want a product that fulfills my basic need. And there is a consumer segment like that. And some categories, I mean, commodities, FMCG categories are bound to be in the middle of these things. Think about private labels. There is an increase in downgrading to private labels, and I wouldn't say it's downgrading also. I mean, if you visit a local supermarket, even in the local context, how many products are there with the house brand? So, especially commodities, they will find that, it's a basic need, it's a basic fulfillment. So I will stick to a brand that gives me that, or a kind of private label that gives me that. So it depends on the consumer segment, as I mentioned. These three examples could apply to different segments, but it's important to be aware that there is a shift to value, whether it is being careful or moving to bigger pack sizes, whether it is completely shifting to something more of value to their lifestyles or life. And also for some segments who are kind of downgrading or shifting to private labels. So that was the first kind of trend that I kind of saw as an upcoming one, and something we need to be mindful of. Moving to the second one, ethical consumerism. Now, ethical consumerism is something that is rapidly on the rise. It possibly is more prominent in the Western world, but it is coming to the Asian region, and it's coming to the likes of our own country as well. It's mainly driven by the younger generation and the youth. And that's something that we will continue to have to focus on. We need to bring some of these elements, which I'm going to talk about, into your marketing strategies. Consumers demand that companies care beyond revenue. Now, protecting the health and interests of society and the planet is the new expectation. Sustainable offerings and solutions are a must for companies to embrace. Now, a few years back, you would term this as sustainability, CSR, sustainability. But I think it's going beyond that now. They're also talking about societal aspects, about societal inequity. So it's important that we realize that it is a much broader than just doing sustainable work and also the environment. I want to bring an example here from my days at MAS. We used to work with a brand called Patagonia in the US. You can Google it later on. And they have an initiative which is called 1% for the planet. They allocate 1% of their revenue back to preservation and reforestation of natural environment. So that's an amazing example of how they're giving back to the environment. And they also have another program which is called Wonewear. Now, Patagonia is an apparel brand. I forgot to mention at the start. They have a program called Wonewear where they look to extend the lifetime of a product. Now, as marketers, what we always talk about is frequency of purchase. How do I increase consumption? How do I increase users or usage, or increase frequency of purchase? But in this example, they are having certain programs to increase the lifetime of the product by repairing old clothing. How interesting is that? I mean, there are consumers who would opt for that option. And at the same time, the company is very well received by the consumers, and they're growing rapidly because they have this element of looking beyond revenue. The second one is consumers want transparency. Now, that's an interesting one too, especially in this age of misinformation and the age of social media and lots of information being thrown out and being seen. Consumers want transparency. Now, this could be to do with your product, your pricing, your process, your service, the raw materials you use, and especially when it comes to food and beverage, the ingredients you use. Consumers want to know what's going behind their product. Now, the apparel industry again here is is under the microscope here, because consumers want to know where it is made, how it is made, and what is used to make it. Similarly, for F&B, ingredients, what ingredients are used are very important for consumers to know. Now, maybe 5-10 years ago, consumers didn't really care or didn't mind not knowing it. But now I think they are looking at more information. They want transparency. And I'll give you a little bit of a little bit of a hint when you go and look at the ingredients list. The ingredient list always starts with the ingredient which has the most composition in the entire product. So these are information that you can freely share with your consumers, because end of the day, there is no hiding from the consumer. They will eventually find out. So it might as well be transparent upfront. So how does this help your brand? It helps grow brand loyalty. It helps you de-escalate any crisis that can come later on. So if you really want to be a brand that is driving brand loyalty, we have to find ways of being open, honest, so that consumers really value what brand loyalty, and they will be obviously brand loyal to you. You can make information more accessible. Consumers could respond online. You could respond to consumers online when they come up with certain queries. And also, it's important to create a culture of honesty within the organization. It's important that everyone feels that they're doing the right thing. Easier said than done, I know, in terms of products and services, not easy to do, but we have to start thinking that way, because the future will demand, the consumers will demand transparency. The final one was on accountability. Again, consumers expect accountability. Basically, as a brand, if you make a mistake, you have to own up to it. Again, there's no hiding. Admitting mistakes and rectifying them directly with your consumer is the future, because think about a product or service that you are marketing, and the consumer is not happy about something and comes to you with a complaint, and obviously he or she will not be happy at that particular moment. But if you treat that customer well, with honesty, and take accountability for your product or service, whatever the issue was, I'm pretty sure that that customer is not going to walk away from your brand. He or she will definitely stay on, and will value that you took accountability, and will know that if there is any concern or any issue, here's a brand that owns up to it. So in a nutshell, ethical consumerism is on the rise. As I mentioned, more kind of popular in the Western world, but it's coming to Asia, and it will obviously come to Sri Lanka as well. So something to think about for the future. All right, let's move on to the next one, which is health and wellness. Now, again, today's consumers are more concerned about their health and wellness. And yes, this is also partially due to the pandemic. But in my opinion, it was always on the rise. Today's consumers also view health and wellness in a little bit of a broader scope. If you look at how we used to talk about health and wellness, it's about physical health, right? As long as you're healthy physically, that's what health and wellness meant. And also there was another part of it in terms of being fit or staying healthy in terms of your exercise or so on and so forth. But there are 6 elements according to Euromonitor. Euromonitor International is a research company which did an analysis on 6 kind of areas which they feel health and wellness now broadly moves into. The first one obviously is about better health. It starts with the fundamentals. Physical health is very important. And Euromonitor has also seen a surge in off-the-counter medical equipment, health trackers, pressure meters, oxygen monitors. So these are medical equipment that is growing for off-the-counter purchase. So that is a clear sign of consumers putting a big emphasis on their physical health as well. And locally, a Kanta research which was conducted some months ago has found that categories such as analgesics and Ayurvedic medicine is on the rise. And that not only because of the pandemic, it was always on the rise, especially in Sri Lanka, especially the Ayurvedic medicine. Second one was on fitness. Again, COVID-19 is pushing people to live more healthy, find more healthier ways of passing their time, especially in a lockdown environment, and they're moving towards exercise. They're moving towards fitness. So implications for us marketers, look at it as opportunities. I mean, here are opportunities for wearables, for fitness trackers, for fitness equipment, and on the services side for fitness advice or tutorials. So many opportunities open up by this new kind of scope that is broadening on health and wellness. Third one is better nutrition. Yes, consumers are now cooking more at home. They're looking at more nutritious ways to cook their food. So again, ingredients, food items that are healthy, recipes that would help them to cook more nutritious food. These are some of the elements that we need to look at. And I'm again going to the Kanta research that was conducted, and they found that herbal categories are growing. The perceived goodness of organic and natural produce is increasing. So this is something we need to keep in mind as well. And during the past 4 to 5 months, we all know the conversation around organic. So this is something that is not just going to die off, it's going to increase in the future. There are a few other elements as well. Appearance. Now, who would thought appearance would come under health and wellness? From skincare to personal grooming, this is also on the rise. And we could relate to that. I mean, over the pandemic, we saw a huge increase in personal grooming products. Think about it. You couldn't go to the salon. You couldn't go to that weekly or monthly appointment. You had to find alternatives at home. So definitely, there is an opportunity there for us to think about. The other two elements which are here is better sleep. It's important, especially when you're spending more time at home, and better mindfulness. I think this is a very important area. App downloads of meditation, YouTube views of meditation kind of programs have increased. So just in a nutshell, all these will kind of create more opportunities in terms of products and services. There'll be a lot of opportunity for online services, for personal training, nutritionists, counseling. So these are some of the elements that we can think beyond just physical health. The second aspect is that consumers are also more than ever obsessed about safety. We now live in an environment where safety is paramount. Everyone is worried about their safety, and this is going to be a new wellness movement. I mean, the pandemic, we hope will go away soon, but post-pandemic, there will be some behavioral changes in consumers that will lag and continue for a period of time. And this particular area on safety, I have a feeling that it will continue. The fear of infection, increased health awareness will definitely create more demand for hygiene products. We all know the increase in hygiene products during the pandemic, but post-pandemic also consumers will be looking at hygiene and looking at a more different approach in terms of looking at health awareness. Consumers will also opt for things like cashless options, contactless solutions. Think about Uber, especially for the higher SEC segments who are ordering on Uber and have the leave at the door option, going to a supermarket and not having to give your credit card over to the cashier. So contactless, cashless, use of QR codes, use of online forms. This will definitely increase in the future to avoid contact. So as marketers and as companies, we need to implement safety measures in whatever we do, which is important in the short term. And in the long term, we can think of innovations that target these concerns and reassure customers on safety. So this is looking at health and wellness at a slightly more broader level. All right, the fourth one, which is also an interesting one, emergence and the implication of stay-home economy. This is a new area. Also, because of the COVID situation, most of us initially we were forced to stay at home because we had no option. We couldn't go out, and subsequently we are choosing to stay at home because again the environment outside is not very safe. So the home has become a sort of a new economy, and this is something that we need to really understand because it throws out a lot of opportunities and also implications as we market. I mean, I'll just run through a few examples. Think about it. At home, what do? We're learning from home, whether it is connecting through a mobile device or a laptop, with more internet being downloaded every day, and then we are working from home, same thing, more connectivity required. Cooking at home. Now here's an interesting thing. At Singer during the pandemic, two of the fastest selling categories for us was computers, mobile phones, which I would club together, and kitchen appliances. People were cooking at home much more frequently and much more than they were used to doing or they were doing before. So what else? They were also working out at home. Think of the consumers who couldn't go out to the gym. Again, this would apply slightly to the higher SCCs. So they found ways to work out at home, right? And fitness equipment and looking at online fitness classes is on the rise. Entertainment, we all are looking at entertainment. In the past, we all used to go out, or we go to a cinema, or we go meet friends. But what do? Currently, it's all TV, and Netflix is being downloaded. There are new streaming apps that have come through. So there's an increase in the need for entertainment at home. So this is something that we also need to think about. Apart from that, there is also gardening at home. How many of you who have kind of used the time to do some gardening, if you are lucky enough to have a garden, and also to grow some maybe organic vegetables in your garden? That's on the rise. So a lot of changes have happened due to the pandemic. There's also relaxing at home. Now we also want to relax at home, so that is important. And whilst doing all this, having spent all this time at home, all you see is your surroundings, which are sometimes limited to four walls. And you think, hang on, I need to upgrade my home. So there is opportunity there as well. Consumers are spending more time at home, so they want to kind of upgrade. They see something and think, okay, maybe I should get a new item. Maybe I should change something. So these are all opportunities out there. And you may argue saying that, okay, once the pandemic is over, people will go out. Yes, they will. There'll be, in fact, a sudden spike of people wanting to get out of the home because it's tough to also be in a closed environment. But some of these elements that we spoke about will continue to stay on. So it's important that we as marketers understand what of these elements will lag behind and what are those opportunities that we can kind of leverage on. Also, from a more societal side of things, staying at home means you're spending more time with the family. Staying at home means you have less contact with the outside world as well. What does that do to the psychology of your consumers? Something to think about, maybe a little bit of a deeper conversation to have in that regard, but something to think about in the future. All right. The final trend that I would like to talk to you about before I move on to the digital side is the virtual customer or the virtual consumer. Now, we've seen an increased online engagement and social media usage. Again, no brainer. Everyone knows that the digital kind of platform is really growing exponentially. And consumers are spending far more time on social media and other digital mediums than ever before. So it's important to kind of understand where these consumers are spending most of their time, right? And often we all, as marketers, I think we have come to a stage where we say, yes, we need to kind of look at an investment on digital marketing. We need to be on social media, but it's important to also take into account that consumers not necessarily will want to always see you as a marketing team just doing hardcore selling online and just promoting your products and services online. It's also a space where they spend a lot of time, they interact with their friends, they also need engagement. Engagement is a very important element that we need to consider, especially when we are doing marketing online. Social media is obviously, again, as I mentioned, somewhere I spend most of my time. And am I always in the mind frame to do shopping, or am I always in the mind frame to consider a product or a service for purchase? Maybe not. So engagement activities on social media is very important. We recently conducted many engagement ideas because we have the luxury of having certain categories to do so, especially on kitchen appliances. We do cooking challenges, we share recipes. When it comes to sewing, we have sewing classes, we have sewing competitions, all to engage the consumer. And this is where they will connect with your brand at a higher level rather than just seeing post after post of you promoting the product. So I understand that we are in a commercial world, so we need to sell our products and services, but make sure when you go to social media that there is a balance, that we have the engagement factor coming in so that there is a strong connect with your brand. So brand building is also important in the social media and in the digital marketing space. The second one is in terms of e-commerce. Now, this is something, again, all of you know about this. E-commerce is a channel that is growing exponentially, and no doubt it will continue to grow, and it will have more and more companies and brands getting into e-commerce. This is no doubt, and there is no argument here. But we also need to find out the role of the physical store, especially in a market like Sri Lanka, where e-commerce accounts for less than 5%. So 95% or close to 96% comes from physical stores. That's brick and mortar stores. So this is rapidly growing in the Western world and in the Asian region. Sri Lanka too, e-commerce growths are at like 600%, 1000%, rapidly growing. No one is kind of doubting that, but we have to understand that in the Sri Lankan context, we also have many brick and mortar or physical stores. So how do we move forward? Definitely invest on e-commerce and ensure that that channel is given a focus. But it's also important that you look at your physical stores and see how you can change the experience, and that's where omni-channel comes in, rather than multi-channel where you have separate kind of routes to the consumer. Omni-channel is about how you replicate the consumer experience, and the key word is the experience, and ensure that it is seamless across the different mediums. So this, I believe, is the future, especially for a market like Sri Lanka, where we are heavily reliant on brick and mortar or physical stores. Businesses can easily integrate virtual processes to their physical stores. I'll give you another example from Singer. I'm sorry to use so many examples, but If you walk into a Singer store, we have 430 plus stores. If you walk into a Singer store, you will find a screen, which is an interactive screen where consumers can browse through the products that we have. And imagine walking into a store and the product is not available. They could browse through that panel and order the product online through the e-commerce channel, and it will be delivered to the outlet where they can come for a pickup. So this is maybe one step of trying to merge two different mediums into kind of one element, which is the physical store. So rather than competing, saying that, look, e-commerce is the only way forward, physical stores are going to die off, maybe so, but it's going to take a long time for that to happen, especially in a market like Sri Lanka. So without competing with each other, we need to see how it can complement each other. Imagine the ability to order online, and if there is a product service issue or a concern or a return, you have a physical store that is close by to you. And also the trust element. Okay, if I order online, I know that there is a physical store that I can go to, someone I can physically talk to kind of fulfill a certain requirement I have. So that's also important to understand that it should ideally complement each other, at least in the short to mid term, whilst we continue to aggressively grow e-com, no doubt about that. There is also the other side of the coin, which talks about this phygital, the word phygital reality. It's about having a hybrid of the physical and the virtual worlds, trying to bring that physical element to your homes, especially if you're online. And gaming is one area in this regard that has done really well to try and through augmented reality and so on, to try and bring that physical approach to your home. But that is a little bit more down the line. So my advice is in catering to the virtual consumer, make sure that we over-index on the consumer engagement. And also when it comes to e-commerce and your brick and mortar stores, think of an omni-channel approach so that you can replicate the experience seamlessly. All right, so that kind of brings me to the end of that segment, which is the main segment, the 5 key trends on consumer. And just looking at time, I think we're okay. I'm now going to move on to the next segment, which is a slight deep dive into digital trends. Now, digital trends, obviously we've spoken about the last trend, which is the virtual consumer. Digital trends is something that we need to be mindful of. Everybody says there's an increased penetration of mobile phones, there's an increased usage of internet, increased usage of Facebook, social media platforms. So that is all now hygiene. That is a baseline. We need to, as marketers, do a little bit more of a deep dive to understand what are those elements in the digital media space or digital marketing space that I can over-index or differentiate myself with the competition. So let's get into that. So the first one is about rethinking the marketplaces, social commerce. The word social commerce, again, it's going back to where consumers are spending most amount of their time. Now we saw that consumers are spending a lot of time on social media, and the basics of marketing is, when you talk about the 4 Ps or the 6 Ps or whatever, you need to find out where the consumer is so that you can reach the consumer, right? And social media is now actually one of the longest time spending areas for a consumer. So think about the next level of e-commerce where you have social commerce, that is having your product available to purchase on the Facebook platform itself, rather than having to go on to an e-commerce site separately. So social commerce is growing. Interestingly, on elements like Twitter, there are purchases happening. Instagram is growing. Facebook, definitely, it's already on the cards. So consumers, by virtue of spending more time on different digital mediums or social media platforms, it gives you an opportunity to take e-commerce to a different level, and that is social commerce. And some of these trends, I need to reference Wavemaker, who has kind of done a bit of a research to understand that these are the opportunities. Second one is enhancing the online customer experience. Now here again, because we are so digitally savvy now and always on our mobile phones, imagine you having a query or a question, and it's 11 o'clock at night. You can't reach out to any physical person unless they have a 24-hour hotline. You want an instant answer. Consumers always want instant gratification, right? So in an environment like that, how do you use technology to make sure that your consumer's query or question is answered in a quick fashion? And that's where these chatbots are coming in as a new element. You may think it's not very personal, it's impersonal, but sometimes for certain amount of information, some basic answers would do, and you have to have some kind of AI technology, chatbots, to kind of ensure that those customers' queries or questions are answered then and there. So this is going to be definitely on the rise, and it is evolving. It is no longer you ask a question and there is a programmed answer for it. Through AI, they are able to really map what sort of questions are being asked and to try and link the correct answers to them, or try and find an alternative method to kind of give them a temporary measure till a physical person comes on the other side of a call. So this is going to be definitely on the rise, and if you are having a website or if you're having an e-com, having this chatbot as a mode of having that connectivity with the consumer on real-time basis is important. The third one is in terms of user-generated content. We all know consumers crave for enjoyable experiences with brands. They also want to be heard. They also want to be in the thick of things. Especially the younger generation, they would always like to be a part and be right in the middle of the action. And TikTok is one of the apps that are possibly the fastest growing social media platform or app. And brands also need to embrace this. For some brands and for some companies, they may find TikTok to be a little not so very formal, too informal. How do I get a serious message across? But it's about the experience. Again, consumers crave experience. True, they want a product and a service which is up to their satisfaction, but the experience that you help create around your brand is what helps them connect with your brand in a much deeper way, and that will definitely help you to build brand loyalty as well. So it helps strengthen communities, and it definitely helps a brand engage much more or much better with consumers. So next time you think about a marketing campaign, think about crowdsourcing, think about user-generated content, because this is also back in the day, they used to talk about this as word of mouth. So this is slightly more evolved version of that, where they get to talk about it slightly in the open, and their views and their opinions they matter. So this is very important for consumers nowadays. All right, the fourth one, micro influencers, the true brand partners in 2021. In the past, brands will always have what we call a brand ambassador, or they will have a brand advocate, or they will find a celebrity to endorse their brand, right? In the new age, especially in this digital age where social media is really kicking in, the role of the influencer is rapidly growing. And sometimes we tend to get hung up in getting the best influence, the one that has the most number of followers, the person who has the most number of likes for a certain post that he has or she posted. We tend to get hung up on that and we try to target them. But actually, there are micro influencers. These are more like average people, but they have a larger than average social media follower, much larger than you and I. So these micro influencers are important because they tend to give a much more personalized experience. They deliver a more personalized experience and they get a higher engagement rate. And according to the research and the facts shared by Wavemaker, one of the top 5 trusted sources when making consumer buying decisions. That's interesting. So naturally, when your brand is associated with a celebrity, the association will definitely help your brand, and uh, the relevance also comes into play. How relevant is that brand ambassador to you? But think of a micro influencer who is a little less known, but has a larger follower base than an average person talking about your brand. It is going to be much more credible. People, consumers will actually see that coming from that sort of person is much more credible and they will buy into it. So it's important that we don't rule out the micro influencers who are out there rather than always trying to go for a celebrity endorsement. And finally, a generation ignored question mark. We are all in a youth obsessed market. Nowadays, the modern day marketers also are heavily kind of focusing on the youth segment. But are we missing a trick here? We have a aging population, more so in the Western countries, but even in Sri Lanka, we have an aging population. And they are also now getting digitally savvy. Think about it. Think about your father or mother or even grandparents, how they have embraced the mobile phone and embraced social media. I mean, it's amazing how you see that. So we must not ignore that generation, because also from a purchasing point of view, they have a huge purchasing power. The youth definitely is a segment where you need to focus on to future proof your brand, but let's not get too caught about that segment and forget the kind of aging population or slightly elderly consumer segment. So it's important that we take into account when we market that, again, your product and service, the way it is positioned might be more towards the youth or might be more towards a slightly older consumer, but you must not forget or alienate either of them. You must have a balance and see how you can be relevant to them as much as possible. All right, so I think that kind of brings me to the end of the presentation. So in summary, we spoke about 5 consumer trends. We spoke about the shift to value and the way we look at value differently. We spoke about that. Ethical consumerism, very strong in the Western world and will fast approach markets like Sri Lanka. Health and wellness, the stay-home economy, the virtual consumer, and from a digital standpoint, we spoke about social commerce, online consumer or customer experience, the user-generated content, importance of micro-influencers, and also the aging population, that we should not ignore them. So on that note, I just want to leave you with this quote, which I found very apt for the segment, which is, a brand is no longer what we tell the consumer it is what consumers tell each other it is. So let's be mindful of that, especially as modern day marketers, that understanding your evolving consumer is very important, and understand that the evolvement happens at a very rapid pace. As I mentioned, have a ear to the ground, an eye on research, and come up with actionable insights, and I'm sure you will not go wrong. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shanil. Thank you very much. I think the last quote that you ended up is something that very fascinating. We think about a lot about what all the planning, all the investment, all the focus is about what we are going to tell about tell our consumers about us, and tell talk about what how good our brand is, what type of marketing we do, all that. But I think what you're really saying is what they are talking to each other is very important than what we are trying to tell them, right?
Correct.
So I think fantastic insight, and a very very important point to drive home. So dear marketers, on that note, I'm sure you have a lot of questions, a lot of clarifications, a lot of comments and viewpoints. Please send in. We have the next couple of minutes that to share with Shanil, so I'm sure all of these questions can then be reflected through him and his perspectives. So until I'm not going to wait till the questions keep coming in, Shanil. I've already have a
Sure.
list of questions to start off with. So I'm going to start off with this very particular point, Shannon. This is about you spoke about micro influencers. I mean, I'll start from where you stopped. Now, but is we're talking about an evolving consumer. Uh, how about peer reviews? How about word of mouth? How about the very traditional, conventional, word of mouth marketing? Is it still valid? Does the consumer still pick up these lines, or the stage is completely moved to the influencers, the social media influencers, the YouTubers, the bloggers? What do you think? Is it still valid? Should marketers keep their eye very much focused on the referral marketing to the word of mouth marketing?
I think it's a very good point, Aruz, and yeah, I mean, micro influencers and referral marketing is important, but at the same time, we also spoke about the user-generated content part of it, which is sort of the word of mouth that we tend to kind of reflect on. Definitely still very much on the cards. And this quote also kind of tells you that it's what consumers tell each other about what your product and service is, still very important. And sometimes if you're a brand or a marketer, I mean, if you can create a platform for people to share their thoughts. Often people are a little scared or they're a little worried about opening up a platform to share their thoughts. Think about Facebook, how the comments start rolling in on a certain post. And many of us tend to be a bit worried. Will someone else read that comment and will they form a perception about your product or service? So yeah, there is a negative side to it, but I think we need to reinforce the positive side of it. Create more positive conversation around your brand, and you will definitely stand to gain. So to answer your question, definitely there's a space for word of mouth and for consumers to talk to each other. Maybe the medium or the platform that we do it has slightly changed, but the traditional way of you telling somebody about a brand is still very much there. So you have to be mindful of that.
So thanks, Shanil. I think why I'm really asking this question is that we speak about consumer trends. We speak about the evolving consumer, and today's topic very in itself is that. Now we when we talk about this, there is a tendency, Shanil, that I see, that we tend to forget the basics. Sometimes we completely ignore the fact that we are still dealing with humans as the marketing dealt with humans hundreds or maybe 1,000 years ago. Now, how can we be on top of this game? How can we come back to basics to understand we are dealing with human beings despite all these technology and digital trends? What's your advice on this?
So, I mean, marketing fundamentals, if you go back in history, Aruz, as you said, okay, started with the 4 Ps, right? And then the 4 Ps was basically on your product, which is possibly your product or service. The fundamentals have to be built very strongly. If you are able to leverage on some of these trends that we spoke about, without the fundamentals, you're going to struggle. And it's very important. I mean, we spoke about the no frills consumer. Imagine the consumer who sees through all this and says, look, I just want a product that fulfills the basic need. And you know that we don't want it to go that way as marketers, because you always talk about value addition and value added products, but it's important that the fundamentals are built very strong. So your product and service has to be sound. If you aren't there yet, work on it and get that right first before you start leveraging on that and talking about the other elements. What often we do wrong is, without the fundamentals in check, you tend to go and, you know, do a lot of bells and whistles and smoke and mirrors that we spoke about earlier, and then once it comes down to the product, they see right through it, and that's where you lose them. So 100% right, the fundamentals still, even through hundreds of years, it remains very important for us to kind of address.
Yeah. So marketers, the message to you is don't forget the basics. There's a very nice book that I've read about that talks about how important it is to your marketing principles. State, it looks at the obvious factors first. So I mean, there is a saying that when your laptop or the machine is not working, first check whether the power is on before you really going and change your motherboard. So I think a very fundamental message that was driven is go back to your basics, connect with the consumers, and then you can make use of all this evolving trend on top of it, right? So I'll go to the first question, Shanil. The question is from Kavindu. He wants to know, post COVID, how do marketers sustain e-com sales relevance, as many would go back to brick and mortar businesses, as the Sri Lankan consumer still largely opts for physical look and feel?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and the omni-channel point that I brought up, that comes to mind to answer that question. Yes, during the lockdown, even we had huge e-commerce sales, and soon as the lockdown was over, that kind of tailed off and it kind of settled. But interestingly, Aruz, what we found is it settled at a higher rate.
Right.
It settled at a higher rate. So it didn't roll back to what it was. It settled at a higher rate. So it's important that you keep driving e-commerce, because that is, as I said, very important, and see how the physical store can complement that. I mean, in the future, I see physical stores getting smaller in size. It may not have the full range of products. It may tend to be experience centers or fulfillment centers or even pickup centers. But the role of the physical store is not going to go away for a long period of time. So if you can help replicate that experience and try to bring some virtual element to the store and link the e-commerce to the example I gave of the screen and on the in the outlet, you still have a link. So whether the consumer chooses to buy it online or come to the store, it's one seamless experience. So I don't think it will roll back to where it was. It will be at a higher level, and you should continue to enhance e-commerce and improve on things like delivery speed and satisfaction, and that will continue to grow on its own. We don't have to worry about it. It's just the physical stores that we need to kind of build in a little bit of that virtual element as we go along to leverage on the best of both worlds.
Right. Thank you, Shanil, for that elaborated answer. So, Shanil, I would like to, go back to this point of where you spoke about, consumers are becoming value driven. Now, we always, whenever we discuss marketing, we discussed value as a very important component of the entire proposition. You also made mention that consumers are becoming cautious and frugal. Am I right? So now I'm going to twist the question to you, and I'm going to ask you this. Actually, do you see a shift of value proposition or a shock to loyalty? Is consumers becoming less loyal now?
That's an interesting question, and you and I both have looked at the same McKinsey report, Taru, so that's for sure.
Yes.
See, it for me, it's at two different consumer segments. There is a segment there who will pursue value rather than brand. there will be a segment that kind of moves away and will just look at value. I mean, we talk about those private labels. Uh, there will be a segment that does that. So it is something that is inevitable, but as a brand, if you are able in your portfolio to carry certain products and services which have a value proposition, have a stronger value proposition, you can retain them in your brand. So don't say, look, I can't compete with the likes of a private label, or I can't compete with a low price product. Try and have maybe an entry level product where you can talk about the value, where you can talk about how much more value you're getting in from that product, and try and retain the consumer within the brand. So it's about looking at your new product development pipeline, coming up with innovations, coming up with different pack sizes to give the customers a choice depending on his or her purchasing power. They have an option with your brand, and that way you can retain them out. That's what I think.
Yeah. So I mean, the next question I'm going to ask is also very interesting. The reason I asked you is whether it's a shift of loyalty, because the global report suggests the 1%. I think this was a very US specific study that said US 1% of the top 1% got way richer during the pandemic. They've become richest people have become even more richer.
Yeah.
Right. And that means it doesn't have to be always the low price brands that's winning. There can be opportunity for high end luxury type niche type products as well. Do you see a niche segment evolving in this space?
I mean, definitely. I mean, look at the pandemic, right? Because of the lockdown, consumers were kind of suppressed. And the higher SEC especially, they could not go out and spend the way they used to. So there will be a moment of time where they will want some release. They will want to splurge. And definitely, like, I mean, I was reading some reports, as you were rightly saying, Aruz, that some of these big brands, these labels, are still doing very well in the Western markets and some of the Asian markets. That is possibly pent up demand and that frustration of not being able to spend, resulting in them wanting to go out there and do some spending. So definitely that as a result of the pandemic, that will definitely create a little bit of a spike. But in the longer run, to answer your question, consumers will definitely see opportunity in niche products, and they will pay the extra dollar or the extra rupee for a branded element, and maybe a brand that gives them status, or maybe a brand that gives them a kind of a social kind of a look and feel. So definitely that segment is also going to grow. I think it's about value also can be connected to those kind of products, I feel. Right? Value doesn't have to be always cheap, as you said. Value could be, even for a niche brand, I'm getting so much of value, and value for them is not the monetary value. Value is the social status. Value is the way I feel when I buy the product. So it's important that the word value is not always connected to rupees and cents. It's much more than that.
I think you would agree with me if I say that convenience has become the largest source of value today, post-pandemic.
Yes, correct. How many people pay the extra rupee for convenience? I mean, Uber Eats or Pick Me or whatever. You're paying a premium for that food to be delivered, but it's convenient. And imagine after the pandemic, you think people will stop using those segments? I don't think so. They will still value convenience and pay extra for that. So
absolutely.
You're very right.
Yeah, so the message for you marketers is value is not always about money. Value can be about so many different things. Ultimately, it's about the experience. It's about what consumer reflects that he is getting in terms of value. So I'll go to another question, Shanil. This is from Pium. The question is, the best message to the society, next generation, is respect to the elder people, should not neglect aging population, should admire values. So I think it's pretty much a comment. Yes, Shanil, your views on that?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned when I was talking about that point, we tend to be a little bit more indexed on the youth. We tend to be a little obsessed about the youth, and naturally so. I mean, for a brand to future-proof itself, they need to look at the youth, but also the aging population or the slightly elder population must not be forgotten. They have a lot of spending power, and I'm not saying that just so that we get them to buy your product and services, but uh, your brand can also talk to them, and don't think that they're it's moving out. They're definitely a consumer segment which you need to kind of talk to, because they also may have been your loyal consumer for many years. So you completely alienating them also is, from a brand point of view, you may think it's not going to cost me in the future, but think about again word of mouth, think about how they will talk about it, think about the influence that they may have on the younger generation. All these things are factors that we need to remember and not alienate them.
Yeah. So Piyum, thanks for that question. Once again, I'll give you an example, Shanil. In fact, we did some work within the Rainco's example, and we did realize in Sri Lanka, the aging population, the biggest bracket of the age is going to be the aging population, but there is less than 5%, or maybe we can not that 5%, less than 5 to 10 products that was specifically we could identify in the market that was focused towards senior citizens. Apart from insurance or banking products, there's hardly any. So maybe marketers, this is for you to think through. Let's not neglect them. Let's not ignore them. It's part of the society, but very importantly, there is a market opportunity lying out there as well, isn't it, Shanil?
Definitely, I agree with you 100%.
So on that note, let's move to another point, and just reminding you, you'll have time for maybe two or at best three more questions. So keep rolling them in. Shamil, I want to just go to the very interesting segment that you made mention, the home consumer. There's a new trend that's emerging. Now I know there's a very interesting case study about the how Cargill's magic went about this segment when they wanted to make the whole walls ice cream saga to to reinstate in Sri Lanka. Now you spoke about completely different set of trends that is emerging which we never saw it coming. You also made mention of there are people who's cooking. Now my question to you is, who is really cooking at home? Is it the men or women?
Actually, that's a very good question, Aruz. I think we live in a world of stereotyping, which we need to, as marketers, move out of it. If you look at who's cooking now, interestingly, it's not the housewife always. It's not the mom. You have the dads. Maybe I'm not qualified as yet to come into that picture, but you have the dads. You have the boys also wanting to cook, and that's interesting because they also want to be a part of it, and especially in a home economy or the home environment, it's about everybody getting together and doing stuff because they have time on their hands, right? So previously they're all separated, but together they will always try to pitch in and do something, and naturally they will also try and cook. So the answer is it's moving away from the typical what we're used to, housewife or the mom cooking, to even dads and even sons cooking, and we've seen that. And so some of the kind of communication that we also have, talk about it. We try to stay away from stereotyping because that is not who your consumer is anymore, and you need to be mindful of those changes. So to answer your question, it's not only mom who's cooking, even the dads are cooking.
Yeah, because that's a very insightful thought. I wanted to pick your mind on this. I knew you're going to have a lot of insights, especially selling household equipment or maybe cooking utensils. What I've also come to know is that I mean it's increasingly men who wants to now try out cooking at home, and obviously they need support. They need equipments. The women folks, they knew exactly what to do, how much to measure, but the men folks, they needed even a salt to be measured in a particular spoon, isn't it? So therefore, I think that's what's happening. That's consumers evolving. Don't take an eye. I think in Shanil's word, keep your ears on the market, on the ground. Keep your eyes on the research numbers. So keep looking for research numbers. I'm sure you'll find the answer. On that note, Shanil, just another question that I wanted to really touch on. You did speak about omni-channel experiences. Now, just like we did discover, there is an emerging segment that is posing an opportunity, which is in the senior citizen or the elderly community. Um, what I've also read the report in terms of omni-channel experience, in terms of digital acceleration, in terms of purchases, it is the millennials that is right on the lead. It is the millennials together with the world's high income earners that is taking the lead. What do you think about the millennial focus in Sri Lanka? Are we really looking at the millennials as a separate segment to cater to their needs?
It's interesting. I mean, 10 years ago, when you said millennials, they were the younger folk, right? They were just coming in. They were the youth. But 10 years down the line, where we are now, the millennials have been overtaken by a younger generation. So they are not technically the younger part of your consumer segment. They are at a level where they're working, their spending power is at a certain healthy rate, and they have the ability to kind of translate it into a purchase. So that's also an important segment we mustn't forget, because if you look at the younger population who are just coming in, they will have much more engagement, much more time on social media, but do they have the purchasing power is a question mark. So the millennials would be your, in my opinion, cash cows, Aruz. I don't know whether that's the right word, but that's the definite segment where the heart of all your buying behavior is going to be.
Yeah, because the largest decision making consumer segment in terms of their age is going to be millennials going forward.
Yeah.
I think globally it's about 70% plus from the workforce. So that's a huge segment. So that's another evolving segment for you marketers if you want to really go specific and focus. So Shanil, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Time is we didn't even realized we've almost into the 7:20s. So thank you very much once again. It's been fantastic having this chat with you. A lot of consumer trends and a lot of insights to look out for. On that note, once again, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for all the insights that you've shared. And thank you very much, Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing, and the entire workforce behind the scenes who is able to make this reality, to the membership division, to the marketing division, and the president, the council, and the exco, all of you who have done a fantastic job in bringing this to you every Thursday, 6 o'clock. Don't forget, we are meeting next week as well. Now, this time, next week, it is about digital stuff, digital world, and is it worth the risk? This is going to be brought to you by our very own Shamit Budgamua, who is the vice president of ISOBA. So going to be a very interesting conversation. So don't forget to tune in. Don't forget to join us on Teams next week, same time. Until then, have a safe week. Take care and stay safe.